Victor's photograph said he had finally found his legacy, two newborn boys in his arms, a smile I had never seen when he held any of our daughters, and beneath it, three declarations that wounded four young women more deeply than Victor would ever understand. My sons, my legacy, everything I prayed for. What none of us knew that day was that the photograph had captured more than Victor's pride. It had captured a moment he believed would define the rest of his life. Two sons, a future, a legacy. For years, Victor would look at that photograph and believe it proved he had finally gotten everything he wanted. But some truths take their time. They wait beneath ordinary days, behind conversations nobody thinks to question. Inside choices people assume will never have consequences. And when the truth finally reached Victor Bennett, he would discover that the life he had spent years building was not nearly as certain as he believed. That was when Victor Bennett returned to the door he had walked out of 34 years earlier. But by then, the four daughters he had abandoned were no longer waiting for him to choose them. Hello, my beautiful Cora family. Welcome back to part 2 of Amara and Victor's story. Part 1 ended with Victor celebrating the birth of the twin boys he called his legacy, while the four daughters he had left behind stood around a photograph asking a question none of us could answer. Why had their father been able to give other children what he had withheld from them? His love. At the time, we believed that photograph showed us exactly how Victor's story had ended. He had the life he wanted, the sons he wanted, and my daughters had finally stopped waiting for him to choose them, but life was still moving, and there were things happening beyond that photograph that none of us could see yet. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If someone spends years choosing a life without you, should their regret later give them the right to return to the life you built without them? Or can you hear an apology without reopening the door? Tell me what you believe in the comments. Now, let me take you back to the morning after we saw that photograph. Naomi came downstairs before sunrise. I was already in the kitchen. I had slept very little. Before coming downstairs, I had opened the drawer beside my bed and taken out the old envelope again. Now it lay on the kitchen table beside my cup. I had carried it down without really deciding to. During the night, I had taken the quarter out several times, rolled it between my fingers, closed my hand around it, then returned it to the envelope. 25 cents. Everything my daughter had once believed she could contribute when our family was struggling. I kept thinking about that little girl offering me what she had. Then I kept seeing the photograph of her father holding two newborn boys beneath the words. My sons, my legacy. Everything I prayed for. The two images would not leave each other alone in my mind. A 6-year-old girl offering everything she owned, and a grown man celebrating the children he believed finally made his life complete. Upstairs, Naomi had spent the night beneath the same roof where she had once brought me that coin because her school fees were overdue. Somewhere else, Victor was probably waking beside the twin sons he had announced to the world as everything he had prayed for. Now she came into the kitchen, dressed for the trip back to the university. Her bag sat beside the doorway, already zipped. That made me look at her more closely. You are leaving already? Naomi reached for a cup in the cabinet, then seemed to change her mind and closed the door again. I changed my ticket. There is a bus leaving this morning. I stared at her. You said you were staying until this afternoon. I know. She kept her face turned toward the counter. When did you change it? Last night. That answered more than the question I had asked. She had seen Victor holding those boys. She had gone upstairs. And sometime during the hours when the rest of the house was trying to sleep, my daughter had decided she could not remain there until afternoon. Naomi, I just want to get back. Her voice was calm, but one thumb kept moving along the strap of her bag. I had watched that child grow into a young woman who could stand in front of professors, administrators, and rooms full of strangers without shrinking. Yet that morning, she would not look at me. You do not have to leave early because of that photograph. Her thumb stopped. Then she finally turned. I'm not running. I waited. Naomi swallowed and looked past me toward the window. I just do not want to sit in this house all day thinking about him holding those babies. There it was. Not the anger from the night before. Not even the same sharp hurt. This was exhaustion, the kind that comes when an old wound finds a new way to demand your attention. You could have told me. If I told you, you would have tried to make me stay. I might have asked. Exactly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached for her bag. I need to go back to my life, Mom. And I understood. Sometimes leaving is not running away. Sometimes it is a person recognizing that one painful moment has already taken enough of the day. Have some breakfast before you go? I'm not hungry. You should eat before you travel. Mom. Naomi closed her eyes for a second and released a slow breath through her nose. When she looked at me again, there was no anger in her face, only weariness, the kind of look that said she did not have enough energy left to argue about one more thing. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. I understood what she was asking me to do. Stop, just for a moment. Stop trying to take care of something she needed to handle for herself. I set down the knife I had been using to cut fruit. All right. Some of the tension left her shoulders. Naomi turned toward the table. Her eyes stopped on the old envelope beside my cup. She frowned. What is that? My hand moved toward it instinctively. Nothing. Her eyes shifted from the envelope to my face. That look had not changed since childhood. The quiet look Naomi gave me whenever she knew I was trying to protect her from an answer. Mom. I rested my fingers on the envelope, then I opened it and tipped the quarter into my palm. Naomi stared at it. At first, I could tell she did not understand why I was showing her an ordinary coin. Then recognition slowly changed her face. Her lips parted. Her eyes moved from the quarter to me. For several seconds, she said nothing. You kept that? Yes. Why? Because you gave it to me. I was 6. You were trying to help. A faint line appeared between her eyebrows. You should have spent it. On what? Anything. It was not money to me. What was it? I looked at the coin. Proof. Of what? That. When your father was telling me he could not afford his responsibility, his 6-year-old daughter understood responsibility better than he did. Naomi turned toward the window. The sky outside was beginning to lighten. Do not do that. Do what? Turn what happened yesterday into another lesson about how strong we are. I watched her. She folded both arms across herself. I know we are strong. I did not say you were not. You always tell us that we survived. You tell us we became good women. You tell us his choices did not determine our worth. Her voice remained controlled, but each sentence seemed to require more effort than the one before it. All of that is true, I said. I know it is true. She finally looked at me. But sometimes I do not want the lesson. I said nothing. Sometimes I want to be angry that my father held 2 babies and looked happier than he ever looked when he held us. Her eyes shone, but she did not wipe them. I do not want to be told those boys are innocent. I know they are innocent. I do not want to hear that we succeeded without him. I know what we did. She pointed toward the envelope. I remember the overdue notices. I remember you coming home after we were asleep. I remember pretending I was not waiting for him to call on my birthday. Her voice changed on the final word. I took one step toward her. She shook her head. Please let me finish. I stopped. I'm going back to school today. I'm going to study. I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to have a life. She drew in a slow breath. But do not call me the next time someone sends you a photograph of him. Naomi. I mean it. He is still your father. He made that a biological fact and nothing more. The words remained between us. Hard, exact. I looked at the woman standing in my kitchen and saw the child she had once been. Then I forced myself to see who she was now. All right. She searched my face. All right. I will not bring you news about him unless you ask. I will not ask. That will be your decision. She nodded. I placed the quarter back in the envelope. Naomi picked up her bag. At the doorway, she stopped. Her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her bag before she looked back at me. I am not angry at you. I know. Naomi lowered her eyes for a moment. I should not have spoken to you the way I did yesterday. You were hurt. She shook her head. That does not make everything acceptable. Even wounded, Naomi could not stop holding herself accountable. That had always been part of her. She could be hurting and still worry about whether she had hurt someone else. I walked toward her slowly. This time she did not look away. When I held out my arms, she came to me. She rested her face against my shoulder. I hate that he can still do this, she whispered. Do what? Make me feel 6 years old. I held her more firmly. One day he will not. How do you know? Because you will learn that remembering the child you were does not mean you have become her again. She remained against me for another moment, then she stepped away. Tell Lydia I will call her. I will. Tell the twins to stay out of my room. I will not tell them that because you know they will enter the moment you leave. Despite everything, Naomi smiled. It was small, but it was real. She picked up her bag and walked out. I stood at the window until she reached the end of the street. She did not turn around. That afternoon, Lydia came into the kitchen carrying a notebook. Do you know how old the boys are? They were just born. I know that. She sat across from me. I mean, exactly when? I do not understand. When was the photograph posted? Yesterday. When were they born? I think 3 days earlier. Think? Lydia, why does that matter? She uncapped her pen. Because Denise said Vanessa was pregnant several months ago. I want to know whether he knew about the pregnancy when he called Naomi last year. What call? The one where he asked what she was studying. I remembered Victor had called after hearing from a relative that Naomi was at the university. He had spoken to her for less than 4 minutes. When Naomi told him she planned to go to medical school, his only response had been, "That takes a long time." Naomi had ended the call before he could say anything else. I do not know when he found out, I said. Lydia wrote something down. What are you doing? Making the timeline. For what? I want the facts. What will the facts change? Nothing. She looked up. That is why I want them. I studied my second daughter. Lydia had learned early that numbers behaved more honestly than people. A bill did not pretend it was coming. A bank balance did not promise to call on Sunday. A column of figures could frighten you, but it did not change its story when confronted. Put the notebook away, I said. Why? Because you cannot calculate your way out of this. I am not trying to. Yes, you are. Her lips pressed together. You think if you arrange every date correctly, you will understand him. I understand him. Then why are you writing? She looked down at the page. When she answered, her voice was quieter. Because I want to know whether there was ever a point when he almost came back. I sat across from her. Lydia, maybe before Vanessa, maybe before the boys, he had years before Vanessa. I know, he had years before Celeste. I know that too. He had 4 daughters every day. Her pen remained still above the paper. Finally, Lydia closed the notebook. She rested both hands on top of it and stared at the cover for a moment. I hate unfinished accounts. I watched her. People are not accounts. Her fingers pressed slightly against the notebook. No. Then she looked up at me. But they should still have to answer for what they owe. There was no anger in her voice. That almost made the sentence heavier. Lydia had learned early that numbers could be checked, balanced, and explained. People were harder. On that point, I could not disagree with her. Maya responded differently. She removed Victor's surname from the small business she had begun running from our dining table. At 14, she had started buying plain athletic bags and decorating them with names, numbers, and team colors. She sold them to girls from her school and used the money to pay for her soccer equipment. The morning after the photograph, the handwritten sign on her box of supplies read, Bennett Custom Sports Bags. By evening, Bennett had been crossed out. Underneath it, she had written, Maya's Custom Sports Bags. I found her staring at the new sign. You do not have to change your name because of him. I am not changing my name. You crossed it out. I changed the business. Why? Because he does not get free advertising. I almost smiled. Maya did not. He says those boys are his legacy. They are his children. So are we. Yes. Then why are they his legacy and we are not? I cannot answer for him. Everybody keeps saying that. Because it is true. She picked up a roll of tape and placed it in the supply box. I am going to build something bigger than his business. You do not have to compete with your father. I am not competing. You are. She looked directly at me. Then I am going to win. Maya, what? Do not build your entire life as an answer to a man who may never ask the question. Her expression changed, only slightly. Then Maya looked down at the bags. I am building it for me. I studied her for a moment. Make sure you remember that. Maya lifted her eyes to mine. I will. I nodded, because ambition was not the problem. I only wanted to make sure Victor never became the invisible audience she spent her whole life trying to impress. Mara said almost nothing. For 3 days, she moved through the house with a book in her hand but rarely turned a page. On the third evening, I found her sitting at the computer. A search page was open on the screen. Victor Bennett, Vanessa Cole, Adrian Bennett, Andrew Bennett. Mara, she closed the page. What were you looking for? Nothing. That was not nothing. She pushed the chair back. I wanted to see whether he had ever mentioned us. Where? Anywhere. And, she looked toward the dark screen. He has photographs with them. I know. He has photographs with Ariel, too. Older ones. I had not known that. Mara continued, there is one from when she was little. He is holding her at a birthday party. How old is she? I do not know, maybe 5. She rubbed one thumb across the edge of the book in her lap. There are no photographs of us. He may not have posted old family photographs. He posted one of himself when he was young. I waited. He had them, she said. He just did not post them. Mara, you cannot measure a relationship through photographs. I am not measuring the relationship. Then what are you doing? I am checking whether we existed in his version of his life. That question followed me long after Mara went upstairs. My daughters began moving forward. Not cleanly. Not all at once. But forward. Naomi returned to the university and kept her promise. She did not ask about Victor. Lydia left for university the following year and chose finance. She said numbers made sense to her. Maya expanded her business from school bags to customized team jackets. Mara became interested in computers, not because she loved machines more than people, but because machines could be examined. A hidden problem left evidence somewhere. Years passed. Victor remained visible only in fragments. A newspaper article about his growing business, a photograph from a community event, a relative mentioning that Adrian and Andrew had started school. Another picture of Victor standing between the boys in matching jackets. He looked proud in every photograph. Ariel appeared less often. Then she disappeared from the photographs completely. I noticed. I told myself it was none of my concern. Ariel was Celeste's daughter. Victor's responsibility. Victor's life. But children do not remain separate from you simply because adults drew lines around them, especially when you understand what it means to wait for Victor Bennett to behave like a father. A few years after Adrian and Andrew were born, Denise called me late one evening. Naomi had finished university and entered medical school. Lydia was still studying. Maya and Mara were approaching the end of high school. I was sorting laundry when the telephone rang. Amara? Denise's voice sounded uneven. What happened? Why do you always assume something happened? Because you never call this late to discuss the weather. She was quiet. I put down the shirt I had been folding. Is it Victor? Not exactly. Then who, Ariel? I sat on the edge of the bed. Is she all right? She fainted at school. What? She is all right now. Celeste took her to the hospital. The doctors were being careful and asking questions about family medical history. What did they find? I do not know all the details. She is home. They are following up. I released the breath I had been holding. Then what is wrong? Denise did not answer immediately. Celeste could not give them Victor's complete medical history. Why not? Because she was not certain it was his history Ariel needed. I looked at the telephone. Say that again. There was another man. When? Around the same time. I stood. The basket of laundry shifted beside me, and several folded shirts slid onto the floor. Victor knew? Not until now. Celeste never told him? She says she believed Victor was the father. That is not what I asked. Denise exhaled. She knew there was a possibility. I walked toward the window. Outside, the street was quiet. Mrs. Holloway's porch light glowed 2 houses down. What happened? Ariel demanded the truth. Victor agreed to a test. And the result came back last week. I waited. Denise's silence told me before her words did. He is not her biological father. I lowered myself into the chair beside the window. Ariel. The baby Victor had left our daughters to claim. The little girl whose birth had caused Naomi to put on her favorite dress and wait an entire Sunday for a father who never arrived. The child who had done nothing except enter a life already damaged by adults. How is she? Confused. She is more than confused, I know. Does Victor understand that? Denise did not answer. I heard her breathe into the telephone, then a faint rustle on the other end. My fingers curled more tightly around the cord. What did he do? He demanded another test. Another one? He said the first laboratory might have made a mistake. And the second? The same result. I looked at the dark glass of the window. What did he say to Ariel? He told her he needed time. The words moved through me like something old returning to a familiar room. I need time. Victor had said the same thing after leaving me with 4 children. As though time was a room reserved for him, as though everyone else could remain suspended until he decided what he felt. How much time? I do not know. Has he seen her? Not since the result. How long has that been? Almost 3 weeks. I stood again. 3 weeks. He sent money for the medical bills. I laughed once. There was nothing humorous in it. Of course he did. Amara. A check. He paid what Celeste asked him to pay. And where was he? Denise did not answer. Ariel did not need a payment from a man she had called her father her entire life. I know, Denise said quietly. Did you tell him that? I tried. Tried? A breath came through the telephone before Denise answered. He is angry? At Ariel? No, at Celeste. I frowned. Then why is Ariel being punished? He says he does not know how to be around her right now. She is still the same person, Denise. I told him that. I shifted the telephone against my ear. What did he say? Denise hesitated. For a few seconds, all I heard was the faint sound of her breathing on the other end. Tell me. Her voice was lower when she finally answered. He said everything had changed. I stared at the shirts lying on the floor. Everything changed for him, I said. Yes, Denise answered quietly. Nothing changed for Ariel except that the man she called her father disappeared. The line went silent. Then I heard Denise's breathing change. A small, broken sound came through the telephone, followed by a quick inhale as though she were trying not to let me hear her cry. She called me yesterday, Denise said. I closed my eyes. What did she say? Denise took a moment before answering. She asked whether I was still her aunt. My hand tightened around the telephone. What did you tell her? I told her she could call me whatever she wanted. I frowned. That was not her question. I know. Denise's voice broke on the words. She said Victor would not answer her calls. She said she understood that he was hurt, but she could not understand how he could stop loving her before she had even finished understanding what happened. I turned toward the window and pressed one hand against the frame. For 17 years, Ariel had known Victor as her father. Whatever Celeste had hidden from him had not been hidden by that child. Yet once again, Victor had been hurt by an adult, and somehow a child had become the person paying for it. Denise spoke again. She asked me whether blood can erase 17 years. I stared through the dark glass. What did you say? I did not know what to say. Then you tell her it cannot. Amara, Victor. I did not ask what Victor believes. Denise went quiet. I lowered my voice. I am asking what you believe. Another pause. Then Denise said, I believe she is still my niece. Then make sure she knows it. I lowered my voice. You tell Ariel that 17 years happened. Every birthday happened. Every time she called him dad happened. Every promise he made happened. A laboratory result can correct biology. It cannot erase a childhood. Denise was crying more openly now. I should have done more for your girls, she said. The admission caught me off guard. This is not about my daughters. It is all connected, Amara. Yes, I said quietly. It is. I looked toward the hallway. Maya's music played softly from her room. Mara was at the computer, the faint tapping of the keyboard carrying down the hall. My daughters were home, safe, surrounded by people who knew exactly who they were. Ariel was somewhere else, wondering whether the family she had known for 17 years had disappeared because of the result printed on a sheet of paper. I turned back toward the window. Then do something now, Denise. What? Answer when Ariel calls. I do. Then visit her. Denise hesitated. Victor will be furious. I tightened my grip on the telephone. Victor has been furious whenever another person's needs interrupt the story he tells about himself. Denise said nothing. I could hear her breathing on the other end. If you love that girl, show up. "What about Victor?" Denise asked. "What about him? He is my brother. And Ariel believed she was your niece. She still is to me. Then behave as though that sentence costs something." The line went quiet again. This time I did not fill the silence for her. Denise had spent years loving people from the safest possible distance. She had disagreed with Victor, apologized for him, warned me about him, even helped us occasionally. But there is a difference between believing someone is wrong and being willing to risk their anger by standing beside the person they hurt. Ariel did not need another relative who privately disagreed with Victor. She needed someone willing to remain when Victor walked away. Finally, Denise spoke. Her voice was unsteady. "I will go see her." "Good. What if Victor stops speaking to me?" I looked toward the hallway again, at the rooms where my daughters had grown up learning that Victor's silence could not be allowed to control their lives. "Then that will be Victor's decision," I said, "not yours." Denise released a long breath. "You make it sound simple." "It is not simple," I paused, "but the difficult thing and the right thing are sometimes the same thing." The following Sunday, I told my daughters. I did not wait for someone else to tell them. I did not call it protection. I asked Naomi and Lydia to come home, and when all 4 women were seated around my kitchen table, I told them the truth. Naomi spoke first. "Is Ariel all right?" "She is recovering," I said. "The doctors are following up, but Denise says she is home." Naomi's brow tightened. "I mean, after the test." "I do not know. Has he seen her?" I shook my head. Naomi looked down at the table. Across from her, Maya leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "So now he has only the boys." Naomi's head turned sharply toward her. "He still has Ariel." Maya looked at her. "I know that." "Then, do not say only." I said that is how he sees it. Naomi held her gaze for another second before looking away. Lydia had been quiet, but I could see her mind working. Her fingers rested against the edge of the table, tapping once before she looked at me. "Is he still supporting Ariel?" "He paid 1 medical bill." Lydia's expression did not change. "That was not my question." "I know. Is he still supporting her?" "I do not know what he plans to do." Lydia leaned back slowly. "A payment is not a plan." I did not disagree. Mara had not spoken at all. She sat beside Maya with her hands folded on the table, listening to every answer before deciding whether she had another question. Finally, she looked at me. "Does Ariel know about us?" "I think she knows Victor has 4 daughters." Mara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Does she know our names?" "I do not know." "Does she know why he left?" I shook my head. "I doubt Victor told her the truth." Maya gave a short, bitter laugh. "What version do you think he gave her?" I looked around the table. "The same kind of version he has probably given other people. That I kept you away, that the marriage became difficult, that he tried." Naomi turned toward the window. "He probably believes it by now." Nobody answered that. Mara was still watching me. "Did Ariel ask about us?" Denise did not say. Mara hesitated. Then she asked, "Could we contact her?" Maya turned toward her so quickly that the legs of her chair scraped lightly against the floor. "Why?" Mara did not react to the sharpness in her voice. "Because she is alone. She has a mother." "That is not what I said." Maya stared at her twin. "Mara, we do not know her. She did not cause this. I know that. Then why do you sound angry at her?" Maya's mouth tightened. "I am not angry at Ariel. You sound angry at everybody." Maya pushed her chair back several inches. "Maybe I am." The admission changed the room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Lydia reached across the table and placed one hand over Maya's wrist. "Sit." Maya looked down at Lydia's hand, then up at her face. "Do not order me." Lydia's expression remained calm. "Then consider it a strongly supported recommendation." Maya stared at her. Despite everything, Naomi almost smiled. For a few seconds, neither Lydia nor Maya moved. Then Maya released a breath through her nose and pulled her chair back toward the table. She sat. Lydia removed her hand. Naomi looked at me again. "What reason did Victor give? For staying away from Ariel?" "Yes." I remembered Denise's voice on the telephone. He said everything had changed. Naomi became completely still, her eyes lifted to mine. That is what he said when he left us. Not exactly, Naomi shook her head. It is the same sentence wearing different clothes. The words settled over the table. I looked at my 4 daughters, Naomi, who remembered him leaving, Lydia, who remembered learning not to depend on him, Maya, who had turned disappointment into anger because anger felt easier to carry, and Mara, who still asked questions because silence had never satisfied her. Victor had spent years repeating the same pattern with different children. Something changed for him. Then everyone around him was expected to live with what he chose next. Nobody answered. Mara lowered her eyes to her folded hands. Maybe he never loved any of us. I turned toward her. Mara, she looked up. I am serious. He loved you. Her brow drew together. Then why was it so easy for him to leave? It was not easy. Mara held my gaze. How do you know? I did not answer immediately, because I had seen Victor close his eyes when Naomi ran toward him near the front door, because I had watched him reach toward Maya's tiny hand and hesitate when her fingers curled around his, because there had been moments when I saw tenderness in him, real tenderness, and that was what made everything harder to explain. People sometimes feel love and still choose themselves. They can care about someone and still refuse the sacrifice that caring requires. But those explanations did not belong to Victor. They belonged to every person who had ever tried to understand how someone could claim to love them and still become the source of their deepest hurt. I rested my hands on the table. I think your father loved being loved. The room became quiet. Mara watched me. Naomi's expression grew more serious. Maya shifted in her chair but said nothing. I continued. He loved the way children looked at him before they were old enough to question him. He loved being needed when being needed made him feel important. Naomi's eyes remained fixed on me, but when love required sacrifice, consistency, or humility, he began measuring what he was getting in return. Maya folded her arms tightly across herself. So he did not love us. I shook my head. That is not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Maya asked. That his love was not safe. Lydia lowered her eyes to the table. Mara tilted her head slightly. Is there a difference? Yes. Mara waited. What is the difference? I looked at each of my daughters before answering. Unsafe love can feel completely real while you're receiving it. Naomi's face changed slightly. I continued. That is why losing it can be so confusing. You remember the affection. You remember the good moments. You remember being held, being praised, being wanted. I paused, and then one day the person decides that loving you costs more than they are willing to give. Nobody moved. That does not mean every loving moment was false. My voice softened, but it does mean the love was never dependable enough for a child to feel secure inside it. The room stayed quiet for several seconds. Then Naomi spoke. Ariel should not have to earn him back. I turned toward her. No, she should not. Naomi glanced down at her hands. He should call her. Yes, he should tell her none of this is her fault. Yes. Her mouth tightened. But he probably will not. I looked at my eldest daughter. There was no anger in her face now, only recognition. She knew Victor's pattern because she had lived through it first. No, I said quietly, he probably will not. That evening, after the girls had gone to bed, I found Victor's photograph again. He stood smiling with Adrian in one arm and Andrew in the other. My sons, me legacy, everything I prayed for. The photograph had not changed, but I had. When I first saw it, I believed it documented Victor's victory. Now I understood that a photograph could show a man holding 2 children without revealing what he had done to the child no longer standing beside him. It could show pride without showing the conditions attached to it. It could show a family while hiding everyone who had been removed from the frame, and it could declare a legacy long before the truth arrived to challenge it. Victor had spent years believing blood was the reason daughters did not count. Then blood told him Ariel was not his, and he used the same belief to walk away from another child. He had never understood that the problem was not whether a child carried his blood. The problem was that every child had been expected to carry his pride. That was the day I stopped believing Victor's greatest failure was that he wanted sons. His greatest failure was that he could only love children while they supported the version of himself he wanted to see. And while Victor was shrinking his family to fit the results of a test, my 4 daughters were beginning to build lives so full that one day he would stand outside my door and ask whether there was any room left for him. The photograph said Victor Bennett had finally found his legacy, but even then, before any of us knew it, the photograph was already lying. After Victor disappeared from Ariel's life, I waited for something to change in him. I thought perhaps shame would reach him. Perhaps he would remember the 4 daughters he had already left behind and recognize the pattern before he completed it again. Perhaps he would call Ariel. Perhaps he would apologize. Perhaps he would understand that 17 years of fatherhood could not be erased by a laboratory result. But Victor had always been skilled at confusing pain with permission. When he was hurt, he believed he was entitled to disappear. When he was disappointed, he treated other people as though they had deceived him simply by failing to become what he wanted. He did not call Ariel, at least not for several months. When he finally did, the conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. Denise told me about it afterward. He said he needed to protect his family. I was standing beside the kitchen sink when she said it. From what? I do not know. Ariel is part of his family. Vanessa does not see it that way. I turned off the water. What does Vanessa have to do with whether Victor speaks to a girl who called him dad for 17 years? She has the boys to think about. The boys are not endangered by Ariel existing. I did not say they were. You did not have to. Denise sighed. Victor is trying to keep peace in his home. Victor has spent his entire life keeping peace wherever he lives by making everyone outside that house pay for it. That is not fair. I dried my hands slowly. Naomi was 6 when he left. Lydia was 4. Maya and Amara were 4 days old. Ariel was 17 when he stopped answering her calls. Tell me which part is unfair. Denise became quiet. Then she said, he did send her money. I closed my eyes. Victor always believed money could stand in the doorway where a person should have been. What did Ariel do with it? She sent it back. That surprised me. All of it? Yes. Did she include a message? Only 1 sentence. What did she write? Denise hesitated. Then she said, I did not ask for a refund. I asked for my father. I sat down for a moment. I saw Naomi beside the telephone on her birthday. Lydia holding a picture Victor never came to collect. Maya crossing Bennett from the name of her business. Mara searching the internet to discover whether she existed anywhere in her father's life. Different daughters, different years, the same unanswered request. Show up. Victor never understood that children rarely begin by demanding perfection. They ask for presents, they ask for honesty. They ask whether the person who made promises will still be there when keeping them becomes inconvenient. The answer Victor gave again and again was silence. But while he was removing people from his life, my daughters were building theirs. Naomi completed medical school first. The morning she graduated, I woke before the alarm. My dress had been hanging from the bedroom door for 3 days. Margaret had insisted on pressing it herself, even though I told her it did not need pressing. It has wrinkles. It has 1 wrinkle. 1 wrinkle becomes 5 when people stop respecting it. Mom, it is a dress. It is your daughter's graduation. She ran the iron across the fabric again. You will not arrive looking as though you slept in the car. I have never slept in a car. That is not the point. Mrs. Holloway sat near the window, watching Margaret work. You should let her press the dress, Amara. You are encouraging her. I am protecting myself. If she finishes with your dress, she will stop looking for something of mine to fix. Margaret turned toward her. That collar is folded. Mrs. Holloway touched her collar. It is supposed to be even. It is even enough for people who love me. The 2 of them argued for the next 10 minutes. I stood between them, listening to women who had carried my family through years when carrying us had cost them something. Margaret had grown slower. Mrs. Holloway's hands shook slightly when she fastened the buttons of her blouse. But they were both coming to see Naomi graduate. Nothing would have kept them away. Lydia drove us. Maya and Mara argued in the back seat about directions, even though Lydia had printed the route and placed it on the dashboard. I'm telling you, this road is faster, Maya said. You're looking at a map from 3 years ago, Mara answered. Roads do not move. They build new ones. The old road still exists. So does a horse. We are not riding one. Margaret laughed so hard that Lydia missed the turn. By the time we reached the university, Naomi had already called twice. Where are you? Parking. You said that 15 minutes ago? We were parking emotionally. What does that mean? It means your sisters were involved. I heard that, Maya called from the back. Naomi laughed. That sound followed me as we crossed the campus. For years, I had imagined that day, not the details. Not the color of the seats or the length of the ceremony. I had imagined the moment someone called my daughter's name and the world had to acknowledge what she had done. When Naomi walked across the stage, Margaret stood before anyone else in our row. She clapped with both hands raised above her head. Mrs. Holloway shouted, "That is our girl." People turned. I did not care. Lydia was crying. Maya whistled so loudly that the man seated in front of us flinched. Mara held the program against her mouth. I tried to clap. My hands would not cooperate. For one moment, all I could see was a 6-year-old girl pushing a coin tin across the kitchen table. For the overdue, then Naomi reached the other side of the stage and lifted her face toward us. She found our row. She smiled, and I understood something. Victor had once called educating daughters a poor investment, but a child is not an investment. A child is not money placed somewhere with the expectation of profit. A parent does not feed, teach, protect, and encourage a child because that child will one day repay the cost. You do it because love is not a business agreement. You do it because the person standing before you has been entrusted to your care. Victor had spent years asking what daughters would return to him. He never asked what a father was supposed to give. After the ceremony, Naomi found us near a large oak tree. Margaret reached her first. My doctor. Grandma, I am not a doctor yet. You graduated. I still have residency. Margaret waved one hand. Details. Mrs. Holloway hugged her next. I knew you would do it. Naomi smiled. You used to tell me I asked too many questions. I said you asked difficult questions. That is different? Very. Maya took Naomi's cap and placed it on her own head. Does this make me qualified? To do what? Anything. Give it back. Lydia held out a small wrapped box. Naomi opened it. Inside was a silver pen engraved with her name. Dr. Naomi Bennett. Naomi ran her thumb over the letters. You put doctor. You will be one by the time the ink runs out, Lydia said. Mara handed her a second gift. It was a framed copy of the first drawing Naomi had made of herself wearing a white coat. Naomi had been 12. The paper was faded, the body was too small for the head. A stethoscope curled around the figure's neck like a rope. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, she had written, Dr. Naomi Bennett Children's Doctor. Naomi stared at it. Where did you find this? Mom kept it. She turned toward me. You still had it? I keep everything. You should not. I know. She laughed and wiped beneath one eye. Then she looked around. Her smile changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. Did he know? Nobody needed to ask who she meant. I did not tell him, I said. Naomi nodded. The sisters exchanged glances. What? I asked. Lydia answered. I sent him an announcement. You what? It was not an invitation. Why did you send it? Because he said Naomi would never become a doctor. Naomi turned toward her. When? Years ago. I remember what he said. Then you understand. Naomi held the frame against herself. Did he respond? Lydia reached into her bag. She removed an envelope. The university announcement was inside. Unopened, across the front, someone had written, Return to sender. Naomi stared at it. Where did you get that? It came back to the house yesterday. I felt anger rise before I could stop it. You brought that here? Lydia's expression hardened. She deserves to know. Today? There will never be a good day. Naomi held out her hand. Lydia gave her the envelope. For several seconds, Naomi examined the handwriting. Then she tore the announcement in half. Once. Twice. She walked to the nearest trash container and dropped the pieces inside. When she returned, she placed both hands on Lydia's shoulders. Do not send him anything else about me. Lydia nodded. I will not. I mean it. I understand. Naomi glanced toward the building where she had just graduated. He was right about one thing. I waited. I did not become a doctor for him. She picked up her framed childhood drawing, so he does not get the announcement. That was the last time Naomi permitted anyone in the family to contact Victor about her achievements. She completed her residency. She became a pediatrician. She developed a way of sitting beside frightened children that made them feel as though the entire room had slowed down for them. Parents trusted her. Children remembered her. One afternoon, I watched her kneel in front of a little boy who had refused to speak to anyone since arriving at the clinic. She did not pressure him. She placed a toy stethoscope on the floor between them and began listening to the heartbeat of a stuffed bear. The boy watched. Eventually, he picked up the stethoscope. Naomi waited. He placed it against the bear's chest. "Is he sick?" Naomi asked. The child nodded. "What should we do?" He whispered something. Naomi leaned closer. "What was that?" "He needs his mommy." Naomi looked at the boy's mother, then back at him. "Yes," she said. "Sometimes that is exactly what people need." I stood in the hallway and watched my daughter give another child the safety she had once needed. Victor never saw her work. He never saw parents thank her. He never saw her remain at the hospital after her shift ended because one frightened mother had no one else to sit with her. He never saw any of it. Lydia built her life differently. She graduated with honors in finance and accepted a position at a large company. Within 2 years, she discovered errors in a report that 3 senior managers had approved. Her supervisor called her into his office. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "Yes, you're suggesting the quarterly numbers are wrong." "I am not suggesting it." He leaned back. "You have been here 14 months. The numbers have been here longer." He stared at her. Lydia placed the supporting schedules on his desk. Page 7 contains the original assumption. Page 11 contradicts it. The formula in the third worksheet pulls from the wrong column. He looked down, then back at her. "You checked this yourself?" 3 times, the report was corrected. The company avoided a costly decision. Lydia was promoted. When she told me, she did not celebrate immediately. She came to my house carrying groceries. "What is all this?" "Food." "I can see that. You need more vegetables." "I buy vegetables." "You buy lettuce." "Lettuce is a vegetable. It is mostly water wearing a green coat." She began putting things away. I watched her place items in the cabinets according to size. "You got the promotion." She stopped. "How did you know?" "You alphabetized my spices. I always organize when I'm thinking. You only alphabetize when something important happened." A smile appeared. Small, private. Then she handed me the letter. I read it twice. "I am proud of you. It is more money. That is not why I'm proud. It helps. Money always helps." She sat at the table. "I am going to pay off your house." I lowered the letter. "You're going to do what?" "The remaining mortgage." "You're not paying my mortgage." "Why?" "Because it is mine. You paid for our lives. I raised my children. You worked 3 jobs. I did what was necessary. You still have years left on the loan, and I will pay them." She leaned forward. "Why will you let me buy groceries but not pay the mortgage?" "Because groceries do not become a debt between us." "It would not be a debt. It might feel like one to you someday." "It would not. You cannot promise what a future version of yourself will feel." Her eyes narrowed. "You taught us family shares. I also taught you that being a daughter does not make you responsible for repairing everything your parents survived. This is not about him." "Then why are you angry?" "I'm not angry." "You alphabetized pepper before paprika." She looked toward the spice cabinet. "I did." "You are furious." She folded her hands on the table. "I have enough money to make your life easier. My life is not difficult." It was, yes, and we all moved forward as though that means the cost disappeared. The cost did not disappear. Then let me repay some of it. I sat beside her. "You owe me nothing." "That is not true." "It is. We took everything you had. You were children. We still took it." I touched her hand. "Lydia, listen to me. You did not take my youth. You did not take my money. You did not take my sleep. I gave those things because I was your mother." She looked away. "Your father taught you that caring for children creates a balance they must repay. Do not carry his accounting into this house." She did not answer. I continued, "You may love me. You may help me. You may buy groceries and criticize my lettuce." That pulled a reluctant smile from her. "But you will not turn your success into reimbursement for your childhood." She wiped one eye quickly. "I still want to pay something. You may take me to dinner." "That is not the same." "I know. That is why I agreed." Maya's business grew from the dining table to a rented workspace, then from one workspace to 3. She hired young women who needed flexible hours, former athletes, single mothers, college students, girls who had been told sports were not for them. Her company produced personalized athletic bags, team jackets, uniforms, and training accessories. She changed the name again, not because of Victor, because she no longer wanted the business defined only by herself. She called it Summit Athletics. When I asked why, she shrugged. "Once you reach one mountain, you look for the next one." I heard Margaret's voice immediately. She had said nearly the same thing when Maya was 3 years old and climbing furniture. "You remember Grandma saying that?" Of course. Maya acted as though the answer were obvious. "She said it every time I climbed something I was not supposed to. You remember falling from the kitchen table?" "I did not fall. Mara watched you. Mara exaggerates. You landed on the floor." I arrived there unexpectedly. Mara, who was sitting nearby with her laptop, did not look up. "You cried for 20 minutes." I was expressing surprise. Maya's company became profitable before she turned 25. A local newspaper published a profile about her. The article described her as self-made. Maya called the reporter. "You need to change that." The woman sounded confused. "Change what? Self-made? That is usually considered a compliment." "It is inaccurate. You founded the company. Yes, you developed the products. Yes, you built it from the ground up, with help." The reporter paused. "What wording would you prefer?" "Say I founded it." "All right. And mention my mother." We already included a quotation from her. "Mention that she let me destroy her dining room for 6 years." I laughed when Maya told me. She did not. "I am serious. There was glue everywhere. You cleaned it." Eventually, she also asked the reporter to mention Margaret and Mrs. Holloway. "Why Mrs. Holloway?" I asked. "She bought the first bag. She paid $5. It was worth 3. She knew that." "Exactly." Victor read the article. "We knew because Denise called. He is proud of her." Maya was in my kitchen when I repeated the message. She opened the refrigerator. "What does that mean?" "He said he is proud." "To whom?" "Denise." "Then Denise can keep it." "Maya, what am I supposed to do with secondhand pride? He may not know how to contact you. He knows how telephones work. He may think you will not answer. He is correct." She took out a bottle of water. "Then there is no problem." Mara chose technology. She studied computer science and later specialized in cybersecurity. Her first major job involved finding weaknesses in systems before someone dangerous found them. "It is strange," I told her one evening. "You spend your days trying to break things. I test them by trying to break them, so they do not fail when it matters." She had always been that way, quiet, patient, interested in what was hidden beneath the surface. Mara noticed what other people dismissed: a changed tone, a missing document, a sentence that did not fit with the one before it. She once told me that most security failures began with someone assuming a small inconsistency did not matter. "People ignore things because the explanation is inconvenient," she said. I wondered whether she was talking about computers. I did not ask. She was the only daughter who occasionally searched for Victor's name. Not often. Perhaps once or twice a year. She never contacted him. She only looked. One evening, I found her sitting beside Mrs. Holloway. By then, Mrs. Holloway could no longer walk to our house without assistance. Mara had driven to collect her. They sat together on the sofa, looking through old photographs. Mrs. Holloway held one from Naomi's graduation. I looked good. "You were wearing 2 different earrings," Mara said. "That was fashion." "You said you could not find the other one." "Fashion often begins with necessity." Mara smiled. Mrs. Holloway turned another page. A photograph of the 4 girls appeared. Naomi wore her white coat. Lydia stood beside her in a dark suit. Maya had one arm around Mara. "You girls became something," Mrs. Holloway said. Mara leaned closer. "We were always something." Mrs. Holloway looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yes, she said. You were. Mrs. Holloway died the following winter. She was 89. The last conversation I had with her happened 3 days before she passed. She was in a hospital bed near the window. Her breathing had become shallow. I sat beside her holding one of her hands. You remember that chicken and rice? She asked. What chicken and rice? The day I came to your house. I smiled. You said you made too much. I lied. I knew. You looked terrible. Thank you. You did. She turned her head slightly. 4 babies. 2 babies and 2 older girls. 4 babies. I did not argue. Her fingers moved weakly against mine. You were afraid to let me help. I was afraid you would disappear. I know. You did not. No. She rested for several breaths. Then she said, do not let the girls think showing up was a sacrifice. It was. It was a privilege. My eyes burned. They know you loved them. Make sure. I will. At the funeral, all 4 daughters spoke. Victor did not know Mrs. Holloway had died. He did not know that a woman with no biological connection to his children had become their grandmother in every way that mattered. He did not know that Lydia paid for the flowers, that Maya closed her company for the day, that Mara created a slideshow containing photographs from nearly 30 years of family events, that Naomi stood at the front and told everyone. She never asked what she would receive from loving us. She simply loved us. Victor missed that too. Then came the weddings. Naomi married first. His name was Gabriel Carter. He was a teacher. The first time he came to dinner, Maya asked him 14 questions before he had finished his food. What are your intentions? Naomi nearly dropped her fork. Maya, what? Gabriel placed his napkin beside his plate. My intention is to finish this chicken before it becomes cold. Lydia smiled. Reasonable, Mara asked. What do you do when Naomi is angry? Gabriel considered the question. I listen. Naomi looked at him. You do not always listen. I listen eventually. That is not the same. He nodded. That is fair. Margaret watched him from across the table. After dinner, she pulled me aside. He is not afraid of them. Of whom? The sisters. He should be. That is why I like him. Gabriel never tried to rescue Naomi from her family. He joined it. When he proposed, Naomi called me before she called anyone else. Mom, her voice sounded strange. What happened? Nothing happened. Something happened. I am engaged. I sat down without meaning to. What? She laughed. He asked me, what did you say? What do you think I said? I am asking. Yes, Mom. I said yes. By the time the call ended, all 4 sisters were on the line. Maya wanted to design the wedding bags. Lydia wanted the budget. Mara wanted to know whether Gabriel had backed up the guest list. Naomi wanted all of them to be quiet. 3 months before the wedding, she came to my house carrying an envelope. She placed it on the table. I want to invite him, I knew immediately. Victor? Yes. Why? I do not know. That is not a reason. I am aware. She sat across from me. I have imagined my wedding since I was little. Most children do. In every version, there was a father. I remained quiet. Not necessarily him, she continued. Just someone. Gabriel's father can walk with you. I am walking by myself. Then what do you want from Victor? I want to know whether he will come. That answer may hurt you. I know. You do not have to test the wound to prove it is still there. She studied the envelope. I need to ask once. Then ask. You are not going to stop me. You're an adult. I thought you would say it was a mistake. It may be. She looked up. But it is yours to make. Naomi mailed the invitation. Victor called 6 days later. I was at her apartment when the telephone rang. She looked at the number. Her face changed. Who is it? Gabriel asked. Naomi picked up the receiver. Hello? I heard Victor's voice faintly from where I sat. Naomi? Yes. This is your father. She closed her eyes briefly. I know. I received the invitation. All right, you are getting married. Yes. To Gabriel? Yes. He is a teacher? He is... A long pause followed. Then Victor said, I am happy for you. Naomi's fingers closed around the telephone cord. Thank you. I do not think I can attend. She became very still. Why? It would be uncomfortable. For whom? Everyone. You do not know everyone. I know enough. Do you? Naomi, I do not want to create a scene. There would not be a scene. Your mother may feel differently. I stood. Naomi lifted one hand toward me. Do not. I remained where I was. My mother did not send the invitation, she said. I understand that. Then, do not use her. I am not using anyone. Why are you not coming? Victor sighed. I have a family. Naomi's face emptied. So do I. That is not what I meant. What did you mean? Vanessa would not be comfortable. Then come without Vanessa. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Naomi, I am your daughter. I know. You have missed every important day of my life. That is not fair. She laughed softly. It was the same broken sound I had heard when she first learned Vanessa was carrying boys. You missed my science competitions. I was working, my university acceptance. I heard about it later. My graduation announcement came back unopened. I did not send it back. Somebody at your house did. I cannot control everything. But you can control whether you attend my wedding. He became quiet. Naomi waited. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. I think too much time has passed. Her eyes closed. What does that mean? It means I cannot walk into that room and pretend I have been your father. I did not ask you to pretend. Then what would I be doing there? Witnessing it. Another silence. I'm sorry, he said. Naomi opened her eyes. You always are. I hope you have a beautiful day. I will. She ended the call. For several seconds, she stood without moving. Then she placed the receiver down carefully. Gabriel approached her. She turned toward him. He is not coming. Gabriel did not tell her it was Victor's loss. He did not say she deserved better. He did not try to cover the moment with a lesson. He simply held her. Naomi allowed herself to cry for less than a minute. Then she wiped her face. I want to change the seating chart. What do you want to change? I asked. There was a chair beside you. I knew the one. We had never placed Victor's name on it, but we had left the space. Remove it, Naomi said. I nodded. On her wedding day, Naomi walked down the aisle alone. Not because no one loved her enough to accompany her, because she had chosen to enter her marriage as herself. At the reception, she danced with Margaret, then with Gabriel's father, then with Lydia, Maya, and Mara. Nobody looked toward an empty chair. There was not one. Lydia married 2 years later. She did not invite Victor. She mailed him a single letter after the wedding. I asked what it said. Nothing emotional. That does not answer my question. She handed me a copy. Victor, I married a man named Nicholas Hale on Saturday. You were not invited because I did not want to spend my wedding day watching the door. I am informing you because I do not want you to learn from someone else and later claim we kept it from you. Lydia, that is all I asked? That is enough. Victor sent a gift, a check. Lydia returned it. He called. She answered. Why did you send it back? Because I do not need it. It was a wedding gift. You have never met my husband. That does not mean I cannot send something. You were asked for school fees. What? You refused. Lydia, that was years ago. Yes, I am trying to do something kind. A check is not kindness when it arrives 30 years late and asks to be mistaken for love. I did not say it was love. That is the first accurate thing you have said. She ended the call. Maya married next. She chose a small ceremony at the top of a hill outside the city. Her husband, Dre Monroe, had worked with her company for years before they began dating. He understood Maya's anger without admiring it. That was important. Some people loved the fire in Maya until it warmed something they wanted protected. Dre respected the fire and still told her when it was burning the wrong person. Are you inviting Victor? I asked. Maya was fastening ribbons around small boxes for the guests. No, have you decided? I decided when I was 6. You were not 6 when he left. I decided on Naomi's behalf. You cannot do that. Fine. I decided when I saw the legacy photograph. You were a teenager, and correct. I sat beside her. Do you want him there? She tied another ribbon. I want a father there. That is not what I asked. Her hand stopped. No, she said quietly. I do not want Victor there. Then do not invite him. Denise told Victor about the wedding. He called the day before. Maya answered while standing inside the venue. I heard you're getting married. I am. You did not invite me. That is correct. Why? She glanced toward me. I could not hear Victor's voice clearly, but I heard Maya's answers. Because you're not part of my life. A pause. No, Mom did not make that decision. Another pause. You keep blaming her because it is easier than admitting 4 different women reached the same conclusion. Her expression hardened. I do not hate you. She listened. I do not know you well enough to hate you. Another silence. Then Victor must have said something about being her father. Maya looked out across the hill. You are the man who fathered me. She listened again. That sentence is not cruel. It is accurate. Her voice remained steady. I hope you have a peaceful life, Victor, but you will not enter mine because you heard there was a celebration. She ended the call. The following afternoon, she married Dre beneath an open sky. Wind pulled at her veil. She laughed through the entire ceremony. Mara married last by then. Margaret's health had begun to fail. She used a cane. She tired quickly. But when Mara announced her engagement to Alan Reyes, Margaret straightened as though the years had released her. I am wearing blue, she declared. Mara smiled. You may wear any color you want. I know. Alan was quiet like Mara, but not withdrawn. He listened carefully. He remembered small details. The first time he visited my house, he repaired a loose cabinet hinge without announcing that he had done it. Mara noticed 3 days later. You fixed it. It was loose. You did not tell anyone. I did not think it required a ceremony. She looked at me after he left. I am going to marry him. You have known him 4 months. I did not say tomorrow. She was right. 2 years later, he proposed. Mara invited Victor. Her sisters were furious. Maya spoke first. Why? Because I want to. That is not a reason. It was enough when Naomi did it. Naomi regretted it. Naomi sat beside her. I regret that he hurt me. I do not regret asking. Maya turned toward her. Why are you encouraging this? I am not. I am answering honestly. Lydia looked at Mara. What do you expect? Nothing. That is not true. Mara considered the accusation. Then she nodded. You're right. What do you expect? I want him to answer one question. Which one? I asked. She looked at me. Whether he ever wanted to know us. The room became silent. Mara mailed the invitation with a handwritten note asking Victor to call her directly. He called 2 weeks later. She took the call in my living room. I offered to leave. She asked me to stay. Hello? She said. Mara? Yes. This is Victor. I know. I received your invitation. Will you come? He did not answer immediately. I do not think that would be appropriate. Why? You are a grown woman. I was expecting that. What? That you would use my age as though it explains your absence. That is not what I am doing. You left when I was 4 days old. I'm not responsible for how old I became while you stayed away. Victor said something I could not hear. Mara's face did not change. I did not invite you to walk me down the aisle. Another pause. I have someone doing that. It was Alan's mother. Mara had asked her because Margaret was not strong enough to walk the distance safely, and because she wanted to honor the woman who had welcomed her without hesitation. I invited you to sit in a chair and witness that I became a person. Her fingers rested against the table. You once stood over my bassinet and forgot to include me when you said you came to see your daughters. I turned toward her. I had never told Mara that detail. She must have heard it from Naomi or Lydia. Victor spoke for a long time. Mara listened. Then she asked, Did you ever want to know us? Silence. Even from across the room, I could feel it. Mara waited. Did you? Victor finally answered. Her eyes lowered. What did he say? I asked later. She did not tell me immediately. The call continued. I understand, she said. Then, thank you for answering. She ended it. I went to her. What did he say? Mara remained seated. He said it became harder every year. That is not an answer. I told him that. What did he say then? She rubbed her thumb across the edge of the table. He said at first he believed there would be more time. I sat beside her. Then he believed we hated him. You were children. I said that too. What was his answer? He said he was ashamed. The word surprised me. Not because I believed Victor had never felt shame, because shame was the first emotion he had admitted that did not place responsibility on someone else. Mara continued. He said every year he stayed away made returning more humiliating. Then Adrian and Andrew were born, and he thought it would be better to leave us alone. Better for whom? I asked. And he said he did not know. Mara's voice changed. He said too much time had passed for him to appear at my wedding and pretend to be my father. The same excuse he had given Naomi. What did you say? I told him sitting quietly in a chair did not require pretending. Will he come? No, the answer came softly. He said Vanessa would not understand. I closed my eyes. Years had passed. 4 daughters had grown into women. Ariel had discovered that blood could change Victor's definition of family in one afternoon. And still, Victor was arranging his responsibilities according to the comfort of the household he occupied. Mara folded the invitation that had been returned with his letter. I think I have my answer. About whether he wanted to know you? Yes. What is it? He wanted to. I waited. He simply never wanted it enough to become uncomfortable. On Mara's wedding day, Margaret wore blue. She stood for the ceremony even though we had placed a chair beside her. When Mara reached the aisle, Margaret tried to take the first step with her. Her knees weakened. Mara stopped immediately. Grandma, I can do it. You do not have to, I promised. Mara touched her face. You already did everything you promised. Margaret began crying. Alan's mother came to Mara's other side. Together, the 2 women walked with her. One slowly, one steadily, both present. At the reception, my daughters gathered around Margaret. Naomi adjusted the shawl around her shoulders. Lydia brought her food. Maya made her laugh. Mara rested her head against her. I stood a few feet away and watched them. Victor had refused 4 wedding invitations in 4 different ways. One through discomfort, one through silence, one through the excuse of distance, one through shame. But every refusal meant the same thing. When love required him to enter a room where his failures might be visible, he chose absence. Again, and again, and again. That evening, after the music ended and the guests began leaving, Naomi found the old seating chart in a box of decorations. She unfolded it across the table. There were no empty chairs. Lydia stood beside her. We stopped leaving them. Naomi nodded. Maya removed her shoes and placed them beneath the table. Leaving what? Spaces for him. Mara joined them. For a moment, all 4 sisters studied the rows of names. Then Naomi folded the chart. I think we should make a rule. Maya raised one eyebrow. What rule? We stop inviting him. Lydia considered it. To everything? To anything that requires us to wait for an answer. Mara looked toward the dance floor where Alan was speaking with his mother. What if one of us changes her mind? Then she decides for herself, Naomi said. But we stopped telling him about each other. We stopped asking Denise whether he called. We stopped sending announcements. We stopped creating opportunities for him to reject us. Maya nodded immediately. Lydia was slower. Then she said, agreed. They looked at Mara. She stared at the folded seating chart. Finally, she placed one hand over it. Agreed. I had spent years teaching my daughters not to make themselves smaller because they were born girls. That night, they made another decision. They would no longer keep a door open simply to prove they were not bitter. They would no longer confuse hope with virtue. They would no longer measure their healing by how many chances they were willing to give a man who had spent decades refusing to use them. Victor did not know about the rule. He only knew the announcements stopped, the invitations stopped. The relatives stopped telling him what the girls were doing because, one by one, my daughters asked them not to. Their lives continued beyond his view. Naomi built a medical practice. Lydia became a financial director and later opened her own consulting firm. Maya expanded Summit Athletics into several states. Mara led a cybersecurity team responsible for protecting systems used by hospitals and schools. They became wives, then mothers. My house filled again, first with 1 baby, then 2, then so many small shoes near the front door that I began keeping baskets beneath the hallway table. 7 boys, 2 girls. 9 grandchildren who knew my daughters not as abandoned children, but as women who arrived when they promised to arrive. Victor missed their births, their first steps, the school plays, the birthdays, the Sunday dinners. He missed the arguments over who had taken whose toy. He missed Lydia's sons turning her living room into a wrestling arena. He missed Naomi's little girl carrying a toy medical bag everywhere she went. He missed Maya coaching 2 boys who believed their mother could outrun every person alive. He missed Mara's son sitting on my floor with a toy airplane, asking questions no adult could answer quickly enough. Victor had spent his life chasing sons. Meanwhile, 7 grandsons were growing inside the family he had abandoned. But we did not know whether Victor had heard about them. And none of us knew that one day, after the life he chose began falling apart, those boys would become part of the reason he returned. By then, however, my daughters had already made their rule. They had stopped leaving empty chairs. They had stopped waiting for answers, and they had stopped mistaking Victor's absence for a space he still had the right to fill. For nearly 2 decades, Victor built his life around the belief that Adrian and Andrew would carry everything forward. His name, his business, his property, his blood. When the boys were teenagers, he changed the name of his company. The old sign came down. A new one went up. Bennett and Sons. I learned about it from a newspaper article Denise sent to Lydia. Lydia read the headline at my kitchen table. Local businessman builds a legacy for the next generation. Maya looked over her shoulder. Of course he does. I took the article from Lydia. Victor stood in front of the new company sign. Adrian and Andrew stood beside him. They were tall young men by then. One wore a dark suit. The other had removed his jacket and rolled his sleeves to his elbows. Victor stood between them with one hand on each shoulder. He looked older. His hair had begun turning gray near his temples, but the certainty was still there. The same certainty that had once filled every room he entered. Beneath the photograph, the article quoted him. "A man should leave something behind that carries his name." Maya read the sentence aloud. Then she pushed her chair back. "I am going home." "You just arrived," I said. "I have work." Maya, she picked up her keys. "I am fine." Nobody believed her. She left anyway. Lydia folded the article. "Why did Denise send this?" "I do not know. She always knows what she is doing. That does not mean she always knows why." Mara took the article from Lydia. She studied the photograph. "The boys look uncomfortable." Naomi glanced at it. "They are standing for a newspaper." "That is not what I mean." Mara pointed toward Andrew. "He is leaning away." Lydia looked more closely. "You cannot determine a family relationship from posture." "I did not say I could." "You were about to." "I said he looks uncomfortable." Naomi stood. "Can we stop?" Her voice was not loud. All 3 sisters looked at her. She gathered the article and placed it face down on the table. "He named his company after his sons. That is his business." Maya had left, but her anger remained in the room. Naomi continued. "We agreed we were finished." Mara looked at the overturned article. "I did not ask Denise to send it." "Then throw it away." Lydia reached for it. Naomi placed one hand over the paper. "Do not file it." "I was not going to file it." "You were thinking about it." Lydia withdrew her hand. "I keep records." "You keep wounds in alphabetical order." The sentence was sharper than Naomi intended. Lydia's face changed. Naomi noticed immediately. "I'm sorry." "No, you are not." "Yes, I am." "You believe it." "That does not mean I should have said it like that." Lydia stood and picked up her bag. "We all have our methods." "I know. You work until you cannot think." Maya gets angry. Mara searches for answers she knows will hurt her. She looked at Naomi. "And I keep records." Naomi lowered her eyes. Lydia left. Mara remained seated. After a moment, she turned the newspaper article over again. "Do you want me to throw it away?" I asked. She looked at the photograph. Then she folded it once. "Yes." I placed it in the trash. At the time, we believed that sign would stand for years. Bennett and Sons. Victor had finally written his dream across the front of a building. What none of us understood was that the business beneath the sign was already weakening. The problems did not begin with Adrian and Andrew. That is important. Victor's company did not collapse because of a DNA test. It collapsed because Victor had expanded too quickly. He had borrowed against property. guaranteed company debts, personally. Opened 2 new locations before the first expansion was stable. He had built his business the same way he built his life. He believed confidence could substitute for caution. For several years, it appeared that he was right. Money came in, the company grew. Victor bought a larger house, he spoke at business events, he advised younger men about leadership, family, and legacy. Then one of his largest contracts ended. Another customer delayed payment. Interest rates changed, expenses rose. The company still looked successful from the outside, but Lydia later explained that businesses can continue appearing healthy long after the money underneath them has begun disappearing. Revenue is not cash, she told me. We were in her office when she said it. A copy of Victor's company filing lay on the desk between us. You looked into his business? I looked at public records. Why? Denise said he was having problems. That does not make it our concern. I know. Then why are we discussing it? Lydia tapped one page, because she thinks everything happened suddenly. It did not. No, she showed me the dates. The property was refinanced almost 2 years ago. There are claims against the company. He guaranteed some of the loans personally. I understood enough to know that was dangerous. Can he recover? Maybe. Will he? That depends on whether he accepts how serious it is. And will he? Lydia leaned back. You already know the answer. I did. Still, Victor kept the sign, Bennett and Sons. He kept telling people Adrian and Andrew would take over the company one day. He gave them summer jobs, then offices, then titles. Adrian studied business management. Andrew preferred design and construction planning, but Victor pushed him toward operations. A family company needs family inside it, Denise once told me. I almost asked where that belief had been when his 4 daughters needed school fees. I did not. By then, I had learned that not every truth needed to be spoken each time it became relevant. During those same years, my mother began forgetting things. At first, small things, where she placed her glasses, whether she had turned off the stove, the name of a neighbor she had known for 20 years. Then one afternoon, she looked at Mara's son and called him Victor. The entire room became quiet. Margaret saw our faces. What did I say? Mara knelt beside her. You called him by the wrong name. My mother looked at the child. He was holding a toy airplane. I'm sorry, sweetheart. He smiled. That is okay, great-grandma. Margaret touched his cheek. You are one of the good ones. Mara looked at me. I looked away. My mother lived long enough to meet all 9 of her great-grandchildren. She lived long enough to see every granddaughter established, long enough to know I had purchased my home, long enough to sit in my garden while children ran around her chair. She died 2 years before Victor returned. All 4 daughters stood beside me when we buried her. After the funeral, we gathered at my house. The grandchildren filled every room. Someone brought too much food. Someone else forgot plates. Maya argued with Lydia over where the chairs should go. Naomi's daughter found Margaret's old purse and carried it around as though it contained treasure. Mara's son sat on the floor, flying his toy airplane between adults' legs. At some point, Alan gathered several of us outside for a photograph. Not everyone made it into the frame. 2 grandchildren were asleep. One was with Gabriel, another had gone to the store with Dre. The photograph showed me with my 4 daughters and 5 grandchildren. 4 of those children were boys. Mara posted it privately for relatives. Denise saw it. For a while after my mother's death, our family moved more slowly. Grief has a way of changing the speed of ordinary things. Birthdays still came. Children kept growing. My daughters returned to their work, their marriages, and their homes. And life continued doing what it had always done. It moved. By the following year, Adrian and Andrew were 18. Victor had spent nearly 2 decades preparing them for the future he had already chosen on their behalf. The business, the Bennett name. The expectation that one day they would stand where he stood and carry everything forward. But at 18, young people begin asking questions their parents did not prepare for. In Adrian and Andrew's case, the first question began with what was supposed to be an ordinary gift. Victor gave each of them an engraved watch. On the back, he had written, Bennett men carry Bennett, time forward. I did not see the watches. Mara did. Months later, Adrian sent her a photograph, but the beginning of what happened came from a different gift. Andrew bought 2 ancestry testing kits, according to Denise. It began as a joke. Victor talked constantly about the Bennett family line. He spoke about his grandfather, his uncles, the men whose names had appeared on old property records. He told the boys they came from builders, business owners, and men who had never depended on anyone. Andrew wanted to create a framed family tree for Victor's office. He and Adrian submitted their samples. They expected to find distant cousins, old family connections. Perhaps relatives Victor did not know existed. Instead, the results showed no connection to any of the Bennett relatives already listed in the database. At first, nobody panicked. Consumer tests made mistakes. People entered names incorrectly. Families had secrets. Andrew laughed about it. Adrian did not. The twins matched each other exactly as brothers. They matched Vanessa's relatives, but none of the matches came from Victor's side. They asked Vanessa. She told them the tests were entertainment. They asked Victor. He became angry that they had submitted their information without speaking to him. That reaction made Adrian more suspicious. He ordered a private paternity test. Victor refused. For 3 weeks, they argued. Then Andrew asked him one question. If you are certain, what are you afraid the test will say? Victor agreed. The first result excluded him as their biological father. Victor accused the laboratory of mishandling the samples. He ordered another test from a different facility. That test returned the same answer. Adrian and Andrew were not Victor's biological sons. Denise did not tell me over the telephone. She came to my house. That alone frightened me. She stood on the porch holding her purse with both hands. Her hair had become almost completely gray. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could repair. May I come in? I stepped aside. She entered and looked around the hallway. Photographs covered one wall, my daughters, their husbands. My grandchildren. Denise stopped in front of a picture of Naomi holding her daughter. She looks like Naomi. She does. How old is she now? 6. Denise nodded. Then she looked toward the kitchen. Can we sit? I led her to the table. She did not remove her coat. What happened? She placed her purse on her lap. It is Victor. Is he sick? No. Was there an accident? No. Then tell me. Her fingers moved over the clasp of the purse. The boys took a DNA test. I became still. What boys? She looked at me. I knew. Adrian and Andrew. Yes. What happened? She opened her mouth. Nothing came. I waited. Finally, she whispered, They are not his. I looked toward the kitchen window. A school bus passed outside. Children's faces appeared briefly behind the glass. Then the bus continued down the street. Both of them? Yes. Are the results certain? Victor had the tests repeated. And? The same? I sat back. For years, I had known this moment might come because the blueprint of Victor's life had always seemed too perfectly arranged around what he wanted. Still, knowing something was possible did not prepare me to hear it. Does Vanessa know who their father is? She says she thinks she does. Thinks. There was another man at the same time. Denise nodded. Did she know there was a possibility? Yes. The answer came so quietly I nearly missed it. I looked at her. She knew? She says she believed Victor was more likely to be the father. More likely? She was afraid. Of what? Losing him. I stood and walked to the counter. The kettle sat beside the stove. I filled it even though neither of us had asked for tea. What did Victor do? He left the house. For how long? He has been staying at a hotel for almost 2 weeks. What did he say to the boys? Not much. I turned. Denise. He is hurt. So are they. I know. Do you? Her eyes filled. I have watched my brother lose 3 children in a laboratory. No. The word came out before I softened it. Denise stared at me. He did not lose them in a laboratory. Amara. He learned something in a laboratory. That is not the same thing. You did not see him. I saw what he did to Ariel. This is different. Because they are boys? Her expression changed. That is not what I meant. Then explain the difference. He raised Adrian and Andrew every day. He raised Ariel for 17 years. Not in his house. I looked at her. Denise closed her eyes. I should not have said that. No, you should not have. The kettle began warming behind me. He built everything around those boys, she said. The business, the house, his future. They are not buildings, I know. They did not create the lie. I know that too. Then why did he leave them? He says he needs time. I turned off the stove before the kettle boiled. Of course he does. Denise lowered her face. The same sentence. The same retreat. The same belief that his confusion allowed him to abandon everyone else inside theirs. What did Vanessa say? She admitted she knew there was another possibility. That was wrong. Yes, she should have told him. Yes, she should have told the boys. Yes. But none of that makes Adrian and Andrew responsible for what she hid. I know. Does Victor? Denise did not answer. I placed 2 cups on the table. Neither of us drank. What happened when he received the second result? He broke a chair in his office. I looked at her. Was anyone hurt? No, he shouted at Vanessa. The boys were there. What did he say? I was not in the room. What did they tell you? Denise rubbed both hands together. He asked Vanessa how long she had known, and she said she never knew for certain. What else? He accused her of using him. That is between them, I know. What did he say to the boys? Denise looked toward the hallway photographs again. At first, he told them nothing had changed. I waited. He hugged them. Something in me shifted. Not hope, recognition that Victor was not incapable of the correct response, only incapable of sustaining it when his pride began speaking louder. What happened after that? The next morning, he asked them not to come to the office. Why? He said he needed space. I sat opposite Denise, and then, a week later, he met with his lawyer. For the divorce? For everything. She swallowed. He changed the company's succession documents. There it was. What did he change? Adrian and Andrew were supposed to inherit the business, and now he removed them. Did he tell them? They found out when the company attorney sent revised paperwork. I stared at Denise. He could not tell them himself. He says the company has to remain in the Bennett family. I did not speak. The kitchen clock continued ticking above the doorway. Denise began crying. He said he still loves them. I looked at her. He said that? Yes, but he removed them from the future he promised them because they do not carry his blood. He says business and emotion are separate. They were not separate when he named the company after them. Denise wiped her face. Adrian confronted him. What happened? He asked Victor whether the last 21 years counted for anything. I waited. Victor said they counted. Then he said the business was different. Different how? He said it represented generations of Bennett men. I leaned back. The cruelty of the sentence did not need raising. It did not need decoration. It sat between us exactly as Victor had spoken it. What did Adrian say? Denise's mouth trembled. He said, "We thought we were Bennett men." I closed my eyes. And Andrew? He took off the watch Victor gave him. The birthday watch? Yes. He placed it on Victor's desk. Denise looked down at her hands. He said, "You told us your name was a promise." The words stayed with me. Your name was a promise. Victor had taught the boys to build their identity inside his surname. Then he treated that name as something they had stolen when biology changed the terms. What did Victor say? He said they could keep using the name. I laughed once. Denise flinched. How generous. Amara. He gave them permission to keep the name they had carried since birth. He did not mean it that way. That is exactly how he meant it. Denise did not answer. For several seconds, she sat across from me with her hands clasped in her lap. There was nothing left to explain. A little while later, she gathered her bag and stood. I walked her to the door. Neither of us said much before she left. After I closed the door behind her, I remained there for a moment, my hand still resting on the knob. Then I walked to the window. Years earlier, Victor had decided 4 daughters could not carry the future he imagined for himself. Then he found Ariel and believed he had another chance to be a father. When the truth about her paternity changed, he stepped away. After that came Adrian and Andrew, the sons. The boys whose photographs he displayed, the names he placed beside his own above a business. The sons he had spent nearly 2 decades teaching that they were Bennett men. And now, because a test had changed what Victor knew about their biology, he was already beginning to separate what they had been to him from what he believed they were entitled to receive. But the boys had not changed. Adrian was still Adrian. Andrew was still Andrew. Every birthday Victor had attended still happened. Every school event, every scraped knee, every argument, every ordinary morning when those boys had looked across a table and called him Dad. None of those years disappeared because of a laboratory result. Only Victor's definition of family had changed. Again, I thought about the photograph my daughters had once stood around. My sons, my legacy. Everything I prayed for. At the time, we believed that photograph showed Victor at the beginning of the life he had always wanted. Now I understood something we could not have known then. The photograph had never shown us how his story would end. And neither had the DNA results, because Adrian and Andrew were no longer babies who had to accept whatever version of the truth adults gave them. They were young men now, old enough to ask questions, old enough to notice when answers did not fit, and old enough to decide whether the story they had been told about their family was the whole truth. Victor had spent years controlling what one side of his life knew about the other. My daughters knew almost nothing about the boys he had raised. Adrian and Andrew knew only the version of my daughters that Victor had chosen to give them. For a long time, those two worlds remained separate. But secrets become harder to contain once the people living inside them begin asking their own questions. And after the DNA results, Adrian and Andrew had many questions about Victor, questions about the family that existed before them, questions about 4 daughters whose names had barely appeared in the story of the father they thought they knew. What none of us understood yet was how far those questions would eventually travel, or what would happen when Victor was no longer the only person deciding which version of the past was allowed to be heard. My beautiful Cora family, what would you have done if you were Adrian or Andrew? Would a DNA result change the way you saw the man who had raised you for nearly 2 decades? And what do you think of Victor removing the boys from the future he had promised them simply because they did not share his blood? Would you accept his explanation? Would you confront him, or would you start asking questions of your own? Because Victor Bennett had spent years believing the past would remain exactly where he left it. In part 3, he discovers that the past does not always stay silent simply because you stopped talking about it.
This is Cora Stories. Until next time, take care of yourself. Take care of the people who consistently show up for you. And remember, a test can tell you who shares your blood. It cannot decide who showed up, who stayed, or who earned the right to be called family.